So, in the last month or so, lots of stuff has happened in the aviation industry, which has been quite big. It's been big that I think that I need to do an update video, or not an update, but not an update video, but an update on the aircraft industry, because I did do one back in April, and that was when I predicted the 737 MAX 10 and all of this, and then I did the 737 MAX 10 video, but I haven't really done much since then, so there has been quite a lot of stuff that's happened. Firstly, we've had the A330neo, which took its first flight on the 17th of October, or 16th, or something like that. Then we had a bunch of airline retirements. We had the KLM Fokker 70 that I went on. We had Monarch going bust. We had Air Berlin going bust. We had United retiring their 747s on October the 30th. This month, well, the past month has been incredibly active within the aviation industry, and I thought that I would make this on it. So there's been a major thing that's happened. Now, it's to do with the Bombardier C Series. Now, the C Series has basically, Boeing tried the dirty tactics department. They basically saw that it was a plane which they saw that they didn't have the plane that they could actually compete with. So they went and complained to Donald Trump and went and said, "Help us! They've got a plane that we can't sell." So then they slapped a 300% tariff on it. Boeing were like, this is gonna fix everything. This will stop them. This will gain more orders for us. Because it was basically because Delta had bought the C Series and they hadn't bought the 77 MAX, like 77 MAX 7 or whatever like that. And then Boeing was like, "Oh yeah, it's the 77's prospects." The thing is, it's not. It's more towards the E17, like the E190, E175, like the E-Jet series, like the Bombardier, like CRJ, like 1000 sort of esque, and like the 717. But Boeing, they discontinued their 717 program. If they could have revived it, and done like a 717 MAX. They could still do that now. But no, what they chose to do is they chose to just go with the dirty tricks department, because they thought that was a way that they could win out on it. Airbus basically went and said, like, they got this aircraft, they saw what was happening. I mean, Delta even said themselves that the whole thing with this whole shenanigans, they were like, "We're still going to buy it. We don't care that there's a 300% tariff slapped on. We're still going to be buying it." So Boeing going, "Oh, for God's sake," and then, but they're mainly trying to cap the US market and fill up these planes. And the thing is, they've had no proper competition with the Embraer E-Jets or anything like that, so suddenly this has had a massive tariff slapped on with the Bombardier C Series. And then Airbus basically went and said, "So we're going to acquire a 52% stake in Bombardier," and that basically made it so that Boeing lost out on that, because Airbus, they haven't got a plane in that market like Boeing. Both Airbus and Boeing tried in the early noughties, they tried to develop an aircraft for that market, downsizing the 737NG and the A320ceo, the A318 and the 737-600 were born, but they sold very moderately. I think the 737-600 sold a bit more than the A318 did. I know the A318 sold about 80. And then, I don't know what the 737-600 sold, but it's probably around the same number. There's not that very many in service. In fact, I think airlines are starting to retire them now. I know British Airways has sold one of them off to Titan Airways. They only have one now. Air France, I think Air France is the biggest operator of them. I think Avianca might still have them, but there's not many airlines that have them now, and most of them are probably, I think they're converting into business jets. But the C Series, Airbus haven't spent a single euro on, cent, pound, dollar, whatever you want to call it. They haven't spent a single penny on it at all. They haven't touched it. They were not actually interested in the market. The Boeing and Airbus, they were at each other's throats in the 150 to 200 seat market, which is 737 MAX, A330neo, and the 787 A350 market, which is like around like 300 to 350 seats sort of thing. And then there's kind of another one which is emerging, which is between the 777X and the A350-1000, but I don't really know about that. That's not exactly as strong as like the A320neo 77 MAX. I mean, that is the biggest. I think that's the biggest like rivalry in history, like between the 737 and A320 and A320, because both of them, they've just been at each other's throats. As I said, I mean, Airbus, they've actually, in terms of how they've sold it in like the rate of sale, they've actually sold more in a shorter period of time than Boeing have. They've managed to catch up with around like 1,000 or 2,000 less 737s than Boeing have sold in a period 20 years less than Boeing have actually been selling the 737. This year they celebrated their centenary, and Airbus celebrated 30 years since the first flight of the A320. So they have produced so much more in that period of time, and Boeing, they're only starting to pull ahead. The Bombardier C Series has been bought out by Airbus. It's a completely developed plane that Bombardier has spent so much money into. They've tried to make it as efficient as possible, try and put as much efficient stuff on it, combine all of the new technologies from the past decade, 20 years that's been going into aircraft development, and they've come out with a highly efficient plane. Now, this is I think it's the main threat to the Embraer E-Jet series. It hasn't sold as much as the E-Jets, but mind you, the 2 series has not actually sold that much. In fact, I think the C series has actually sold more than the 2 series, because they got a major order from Delta, 75 C-100s, and then they got Swiss, and then they got Air Baltic and things like that. So the C series is now part of Airbus, essentially. I was watching a video by Wendover Productions. I wasn't persuaded by him or whatever to do this. I was just watching that, and he was interesting because he was saying
the real reason Bombardier partnered up with Airbus is because of this. Airbus's final assembly line in Mobile, Alabama. By assembling the C Series aircraft in the US, they'll essentially be American planes, which means that they won't be subject to US import tariffs.
So then Delta can still get those 75 aircraft at the cheap price compared to the 737 MAX in that market to replace their 717s, because that's the reason they got them. They acquired their 717 fleet off of AirTran. I think all of it. I don't know. I don't think they had anything before that. But once they had acquired that, that meant that they were able to get a low capacity aircraft of around 100 seats. It was able to fill in the gap in the market. It means they didn't have to operate on Embraers. It was a Boeing aircraft, and they thought it was quite reliable. It was technically McDonnell Douglas, but you know what I mean. They had an MD-80, MD-90 fleet. It would fit in quite nicely, and plus it wasn't even Delta that did operate the E190. It's Republic Airways, I think, that operated for them in Delta as part of Delta Connection. But the C Series was something which they could completely replace their 717s with. They could modernize the fleet, make it highly efficient, and Boeing, they're just playing the dirty tricks department, and this is what the Americans are like. This is what American businesses are like. If they can't win, they'll use their dirty tricks department. I know that there was this guy in 1992, I think, or something like that. There was an election in the US, and there was this guy who wasn't part of the Republican or Democrat parties. He wasn't any of them, and he was a third party. I can't remember what his party was, but he was getting so much support. He looked like he might win the election, but then the Democrats and the Republicans used the dirty tricks department. They said they were going to disrupt his daughter's wedding if he kept on running for president, so he had to resign from standing. This is the dirty tricks that they use. Boeing decided to go for that department, and to be honest, I think that, Airbus, they've not got that culture over there, but I wouldn't probably be surprised if they're doing it. I'm not saying that, Airbus have got it now. It means they never would have done it. Of course they would have done it if they got the chance, but they saw that this was a chance to actually take a 51% stake in Bombardier. It actually helps both Bombardier and Airbus, because Bombardier, they weren't trying to compete with Boeing or Airbus. They were just filling a gap in the market, which none of them have filled up. And the small aircraft segment of the market is the most competitive part that's not part of Boeing and Airbus, because Boeing and Airbus, they don't sell anything smaller than the A330neo and the 737 MAX 7. Both of which, I believe the 737 MAX 7 is I think is on the production line right now, but it's going to be rolled out in December, or first flight December, sometime like that. And the A319 is, of course, in development. That first flew in March, I do believe. So the C Series, it's basically a whole new part to the Airbus fleet, so it's technically now an Airbus aircraft. As I say, it's going to be good for both of them. That means that Bombardier can negate this tariff because they can make it in an American factory, meaning that the tariff legally doesn't apply, and they can get the Airbus funding, meaning that they're not going to go bankrupt. The only reason they didn't in 2015 was because they got a bailout from the Canadian government. I think it was something like that. I don't think it was a bailout, but it's some financial aid that kept them going, and then they managed to release it, but I think they're now starting to pay that back. But now they have direct funding. They have 50% of the cost for the plane, and now funded by Airbus. So that means that they have, and look at Airbus as a huge company, absolutely billions in the bank that they can use to spend on it. They'll want to try and market it as a highly efficient plane. Boeing don't have any aircraft that they could do for it. If Boeing went and said that they're going to be making a brand new 717 MAX, it will probably be quite popular. Because, in fact, many airlines actually want the 717 now. I believe that there's not a single 717 that's been scrapped. I think that every single one that's made is still in service. I think. I don't know. But lots of airlines want them now. Hawaiian got them, even though they never operated them originally. Of course, Delta got them. I think that Southwest, they didn't get them because even though it was a Boeing aircraft, it wasn't a 737. They're like exclusively 737. They're like EasyJet. They won't operate anything other than the A320 or Ryanair. They won't operate anything other than the 737-800. There's this aircraft called the ARJ21, which is a Chinese one, and it was made by Comac, which is making the C919, which is like it's weird because the media, they're all going like, oh yeah, this is going to break up the duopoly between Boeing and Airbus. No, it's not. It will sell about 150, 200 at tops, but it won't get into a significant part of the market. You can get some competition in the market. There'll be breaks trying to get in. There's the MC21, and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to try and sell to customers. I doubt they get in America at all, especially the MC-20. Like, they're both from emerging economies, Russian aircraft. The MC-21 is actually the most Western aircraft that Russia's ever made. And in fact, it's a lot closer than like even something like the AL-96 was. And even the SSJ-95, I mean, that was the original most Western one, but that's still kind of Russian. But now the MC-21, I mean, you look at it, I mean, you could sell that could have come out of a Bombardier factory. But the C919, I don't think they're really going to get. But anyway, the ARJ21 is that kind of market for the 717. And it's basically replacing the 717s that are operating in Asia, like in China and things like that. And the 717 doesn't have any other replacement to that. The C Series was that offered of a replacement. And that's what airlines are tapping into now. But they basically saw they didn't have a competition. They're like, yeah, but it's going to affect our one, which isn't part of that market. That's like Britain Norman in building a new version of the Islander, calling like, I don't know, the Sealander, or just the Sealander. Exactly. It's called the Sealander, and it's got like double the capacity, and then it goes very good. And then suddenly Bombardier come along and say, oh yeah, but we've got the CRJ200, and that is the same market as that. This is the sort of thing that Boeing did. And as I said, Airbus, I wouldn't be really surprised if they did that either. I mean, I'm not completely singling them out there for that, except that they just turn out to be the winners in this situation. Because as I say, if Boeing releases 717 MAX, it might be quite successful. Airlines wanted it. Delta would have got it. I'm sure that Hawaiian would have definitely got it. All of these other airlines, they would have purchased the 717 MAX. And then it would be interesting because then it wouldn't be against Airbus, and Airbus would have been forced to release something. It would actually be trouble for Airbus because Airbus, they didn't have an aircraft in that market. Boeing had the 717. And then Airbus had nothing. Airbus were focusing on different markets. They tried to do the A318, but they only sold 80. The 717 sold about 130 or 140. So they didn't have any aircraft in that market. And if Bombardier had the C Series, and then Boeing came out with this 717 MAX, then that would mean that Airbus was completely outclassed there. They would have to design a whole new plane, like Boeing have got trouble now with trying to produce an aircraft to try and replace the 757, like the 797, which I'll get onto in a second. This is going to be quite long, I'd imagine, because I've got a lot of stuff to say. So that would be something which could happen, but no, Boeing chose the dirty tricks department, thought they could win, and now Airbus have outright basically went and said, hey, do you want to come into our house? Are you scared of Boeing? Come to us. And then now they're basically using them as a weapon to go against Boeing, and Bombardier are happy with that. They're happy to side with Airbus in this situation.
21.
A330neo, which is something I want to kind of discuss quickly. It's one, at first I didn't know why Airbus were doing it. It looked like because they basically got the A350. They originally, what happened was, when Boeing announced the 787 in like 2004, I think, Airbus went and tried to do a replacement to that. They'd only just released like their A330 like 10 years before. And then they went and said, well, we're going to try and replace the A330 with a more efficient replacement. And then they were like the A330 like 900 or whatever they came up with. Like originally, not like the 900 Neo, just like the original 900. And then Airbus, like the airlines didn't really show any interest in it, and then they wanted an upgrade in capacity. They saw that the 787 was a lot more efficient, it had much more technology, so then Airbus went for the A350, which has actually turned out for much more bigger success. But they saw a way, which I've actually found out recently, they saw a way which they could go and make a bit more money out of the market, because the 787, as you probably know if you're into the airline industry, the 787 is completely optimized for long haul. It's opened up long haul for airlines. It means that they can fly from like San Francisco to Tokyo with a relatively highly efficient plane, though, so it's not like a 747. That's why United recently retired the 747s, because airlines, they don't need 747 capacity except on a few explicit routes, and where they do, they get the A380, so they don't actually need that capacity, and the only reason why it was bought mainly was because of the range. They bought it primarily for the range, so they could fly like trans-Pacific, and now that they've got more efficient aircraft like the Boeing's own 777 and 787, they're not buying the 777, the 747-8. I mean, the cargo variant is, but that's because Airbus, they dropped the A380F, so basically in that market you've got the A380 as the passenger variant and 747-8F as the cargo variant. But anyway, the 787 opens up those sort of routes. As I said, you can go from like the west coast of the US to the east coast of Asia, and you could even go, apparently, you can just about, like 787-8 can just about get from New York to Tokyo. That's the sort of range it has, and airlines have been using it for that, of relatively efficient. It's not just replacing the 767. But that's the thing. You would think, like, compare the sizes compared to the 767. I've got a 1-400 model of this Bel Air 767. It's from like 15 years ago, and then I got the Air Canada 787, the new livery, which I unboxed a few months ago, and you look at them, they've got exactly the same size fuselage. I compared the two doors, and they line up to exactly the same place, but they're in completely different markets, because the 767 doesn't have that much range. It was developed at a time when they couldn't have that much range. It was developed in the 200 originally came out in the 80s, like the early 80s, and was majorly developed in the 70s, actually, but the 767-300 was developed like mid to late 80s, came out in like 1988 or 87, something like that. So that had that amount of range, and it was actually sold like right up until like 2014, the passenger variant, and the cargo variant still in production. But the airlines are now looking for a replacement to that, and they're looking at the A330neo. Now, Airbus, they relaunched this in 2014, and they basically went and said, we are going to get this aircraft so then it's not got the long haul thing, because that's been completely taken up by the 787. We're going to do it for short haul, because the 787 is not actually quite that efficient on short haul, because all of the major qualities of it go down as you go less range. So, I mean, this is why I was quite surprised that I was more surprised now, but I was quite surprised originally why airlines like TUI, they operate like 787s going from like London Gatwick to Palma or to Rose or whatever, because there's a really short route. I think that if they went for the A330neo, then that would have been more efficient. I think the 787 is the only one for now, because probably when they first bought it, in fact, when they first bought it, the A330neo wasn't even announced. So I think that would be more efficient. But what it's designed for, the A330neo is designed as like a 767 replacement, and also an A330 replacement, because the 767 and A330, the kind of same thing. A330 has a bit more range than the 767. It's kind of replacing both. So it's much more efficient on routes from like Paris to New York, London to New York, things like that. So then airlines like Delta, I believe they're getting A330neo. I don't know. I think US Airways originally got it, because I know they inherited their A350 orders from a US Airways. What am I on about? Yeah, I think Delta. They originally tried to see if they get the A330neo, but then they switched to A350. But now they might be looking back at it, because they're trying to replace the 767s, and the A350 it's probably going to replace the A350. The A350 is going to open up a few more routes for them, but it's also going to if they get the A330neo, then that could also help them replace the 767, because when I went to Amsterdam, and obviously a 767 and the A330 as well, because that would be good, because when I went to Amsterdam, I could like unify their fleet, because I got 767 and A330, they're like the same plane. A330 just have more range. I can unify it with a plane which has quite a bit of range, but it's not exclusively like for absolutely long haul, and then there's one that's got like medium haul range. It's one which has mid to long range, but it's quite efficient on short haul routes compared to the 787, and that could unify the fleet. They could replace all of their A330s and the 767 in one go. I know. I think it'll be quite good. I mean, they've got $200 already, but that's basically why I was being bought.
21.
Oh yes, of course. The 797, which is dubbed as a replacement of the 757. Now, the market has changed since when the 757 came out, because as you know, if you're interested in the airline industry as much as I am, that the 757 came out in the early 80s and was designed as a replacement for the 727, which was like a medium-haul aircraft and had about like 5,000 miles of range. And up until recently, it stayed like that. And then from about 2006-7 onwards, for like financial crash sort of times, or a bit later than that, more like 2008, 2009, airlines started using the 757 for long haul, well, not necessarily long haul, but much longer haul operations than it was intended.
Since the plane was originally developed for domestic routes, it can easily be used for shorter domestic flights between transatlantic flights, which leads to high aircraft utilization. a key to profitability.
Originally what I said, I think, when I originally did the aircraft industry video, I originally went and said that the A321neo was a replacement for it. And that's what I went and said. I went and said the A321neo was a replacement for it. And in a sense, it kind of is. There has been a few airline interest in it, but there's not been major airline interest in it. Because the A321neo, it has the range to replace a 757. It has a little bit more than that. It could go a little bit further than that, but it can't go as far as airlines would want. Airbus, they tried doing this before. They had the A310, and technically Boeing had the 767-200, but that was just so old that airlines are replacing it now. But Airbus had the A310, and that was more efficient than that, and it just didn't work because it was in a market that just didn't really exist yet, and they only sold like 200 of them compared to the A330, which sold like 600 or 500 or whatever it sold. I can't even remember. This new 797 trying to replace the 757, it's going to be like Boeing. As I said when they first came out with it, I was like, Boeing, they made a mistake with the 737 MAX 10, and I still stand by that. They did, because Boeing basically went and said, this is the competitor to A321 LR. This is going to completely like outsell this. And then did I say A321neo before? I meant A321 LR. If I said that, then I'll edit it. But it just doesn't work, because they tried to make a plane with more. They tried to make a plane that has that capacity, ended up having less range, which is what was intended to actually compete with the A321 LR, which doesn't even make any sense. And it's going to cannibalize the orders for their own MAX 9. In fact, I think it has more orders than the MAX 9 now anyway. And in a sense, it's a much better competitor to the A321neo, which is what they've been saying. If it was a competitor against the A321neo, then I understand, because the 737-900 and 737 MAX 9, I mean, A321neo, that had like 1,000 orders. A321ceo, I mean, that's sold like, what's it sold, like 2,000 or something like that? It sold loads. I mean, you see them everywhere. Even in America now, they're being sold out. Like Delta, they bought a bunch of them. United bought a bunch of them, I believe. And also American. In fact, all the major airlines, like the big three major airlines in America, bought them. Of course, we got like all the majors. Like, it was basically the 757 replacement on domestic routes. It's this new market which has opened up in the last decade or so by airlines like Delta and American and United. I mean, you even saw in that plane spot video, I don't know if you watched it, but there was American 757 there. That would have probably flown on to somewhere like Newark from Amsterdam. So they can fly planes which, because the reason why they fly them is that means that they can have an airliner which they know will guarantee will be profitable, because it will fill up all of the seats, but it's not a risk where if they fly something like the 767, it might not fill up every flight. So the 797 would be the replacement for that, because that would mean that it was saying it was going to offer like 6,000 miles of range. That means that you could have long haul flights deep into the US and deep into Europe. So you could go from somewhere like Houston, and you could go to somewhere like, I don't know, like Kiev in Ukraine, which is probably not that a popular route. You could go from London, you could go to somewhere like Spokane or Billings or something like that. And because the capacity wouldn't be that much otherwise, and it definitely will fill up. So it's basically going to be the replacement to the 757 long haul, and it will also open up the market just like the 787 has. The 787 has shown that you can open up a market with a lot more range at high efficiency. And if Boeing, what they do, they adapt the same technologies to the 787, which they've already developed, then they could, in theory, create aircraft in a relatively short amount of time, because they could take the 757 fuselage, they could take the same general wing shape. All they need to do is they'll have to get a new engine, because they can't get like the LEAP 1B because that's too small. They'll have to get a new developed engine, which is probably going to be slowing up development. And of course, they're going to have to do a few other avionic things, so like the tail, because that's going to have to be smaller in the tailplane, and of course the wings. But the avionic technologies could be the same. They could have a type commonality with the 787, and they could have also they could make like the cockpit like that in terms of like the hard, like employ all the technologies on it. The avionics could be the same, and the same general technologies of it that's been applied on the 787, like the nacelles, like the great teeth on the back of the nacelles, like all sorts of things like that could be employed to help make it a highly efficient aircraft. Now, Airbus, they don't actually have an aircraft for that. As I said, they have the A321LR, and I was a bit too more keen on the A321LR back then, because the A321LR, it's going to replace the 757 in the short term. But Boeing stabbed themselves on the foot with the 737 MAX 10, because they were like, this is a 757 replacement, but it's only going to be for a few years, but this is a 757 replacement, and then tried to sell it like that. Now, airlines have bought it because they kind of want to replace the 757s now, and I believe that the 737 MAX 10 will be the final, straw for 757s in domestic routes. I mean, all the majors now, pretty much all of the majors, apart from the three majors in America, have all retired the 757s. Aer Lingus, I know they're retired theirs, except the only ones they have now are like leased from another airline, so technically they don't have them. British Airways have retired theirs. Monarch retired theirs, and then they went bankrupt. Iberia did. All the major airlines have retired them now. They're replacing them with A321s, and even the US majors like Delta and United, they were keen to get the A321 in service to replace the 757s. But the 757 is good for use on domestic routes and use on the long haul routes on the A321 because it's an expansion of the A320. That means it has less range. Simply because you got more planes on there with the same amount of fuel tanks. Even if it's slightly upgraded fuel tanks, you're just not going to have the same amount of range. So that means that they can't fly from Atlanta to New York and then fly onto Amsterdam or whatever. This is the sort of dilemma the airline industry is in right now, because there's a big gap in the market there, which has not been fulfilled. If Airbus they came out with something like the A360 or whatever, they could go out with the A360 and try and compete with that. That'd be pretty nice, because what I've seemed to find is that Boeing seems to have a lot more stuff on their plate in terms of aircraft development. They have the 777X, which is possibly their most major one. They have the new 797, which has been saying, they've basically said, oh yeah, we'll develop it. Basically, they put that to the back of the queue, to use Obama's phrasing. Then they've got the 787-10. They've got the rest of the 737 MAX series. The next one's the MAX 7, but they're still developing the MAX 9. Then they've got the MAX 10, which they announced and tried to highly publicise. So they've got that. And then what have Airbus got? Airbus, they've almost got the A350-1000 in service. In fact, I think it's going to be coming in service either this month or next month, so that's nearly done. They both got rid of the A350-800, and so they don't have that anymore. They got the A330neo, which is probably the most major one. And they've also got the A320, they got the Airbus Beluga, and then what else have they got? And then the only one after that is the A319neo. Boeing have to develop the rest of their 737 MAX series. They've got a whole new series of 777Xs, which are actually they're going to take a lot more development, because Airbus are using the same technologies which they put on the A350 in the A330neo, and also it's basically a replacement for the A330 itself, so it's going to take the same fuselage, so it's not going to be that much development. In fact, I think they intend to get it in the third quarter of 2018, so it's going to be in development very, very quickly. And the airline industry is going to move to the A330neo, and Airbus, they just have a lot less on their plate, and they've got all of their aircraft in service now. So even though Boeing might have been early with the 787 and captured a huge part of the market there, if Airbus, they've got the new Bombardier C Series, which are basically, they're not theirs, but they can use them to their advantage. And then if they come out with something like the A360 trying to replace and compete with the 797, then that could be really, really effective for them, and they could gain some more ground in that market there. So that was a very, very long thoughts on. I'm sorry about that. Put your opinions in the comments below, because I'm quite interested in what you have to say. The airline industry is quite interesting at the moment, and I might do one about politics as well, just in the world in general, because it's getting very interesting at the moment, or at least in the West. Just put your opinions about it below, all of the topics I've discussed, the 797, the Bombardier C Series, and the A330neo. So just put your opinions on that in the comments below. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video if you decide to watch that one as well. Bye!